Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Michelle Vivas, Vice President of Douglas Wilson Companies and President of the San Diego Lambda Alpha chapter. I trust you are all doing well, staying healthy and safe. A special welcome to the Urban Land Institute and American Planning Association members who have joined our audience today. Before I begin with the Lambda Alpha chapter announcements, I want to thank our mayoral candidates, Assemblyman Todd Gloria and Councilmember Barbara Bree, for their willingness to join Lambda Alpha in this candidate forum. This is a great opportunity for us and our members to hear your thoughts on a variety of issues and really get to know you more. We are honored to have the both of you here today. For our Lambda Alpha members, a few of our normal updates before we get this exciting program going. As you know, it's that time of year where we get to nominate our class of 2021. I'm excited to induct these new members to the chapter and ask that you turn in your nominations as soon as possible. Look out for an update email from our nominations committee and our wonderful administrator, Geeta. You'll have your nomination forms and instructions there. I'd also like to announce some exciting news that we have 3 available board positions starting in January of 2021. This is a great opportunity to extend these positions to our members. If you're interested in joining the board, please contact me directly. I'll also be sending up a follow-up email. Before I turn our program over to our esteemed moderator, Roger Foley, who needs no introduction, I want to also thank our program committee, specifically Brooke Peterson and Danny Reeves, for their hard work and commitment to Lambda Alpha's monthly programming. Thank you for keeping us informed in land use issues and economics. We'll be announcing our November program in the coming weeks. I really hope you all enjoy this mayoral candidate forum. Again, we're very excited to offer this opportunity to our members. Roger, thank you for moderating, and please take away the show.
All right, thanks very much, Michelle, and good afternoon, everybody. Before we begin, I'd like to quote San Diego's earliest master planner, John Nolan. In 1908, he called San Diego, quote, neither interesting nor beautiful. And I trust today he would revise that observation by saying San Diego has become more interesting and beautiful, but there is also more to be done. As he said, quote, San Diego is indeed unique. Even in Southern California, its situation, climate, and scenery make it stand out in permanent attractiveness beyond all other communities. But San Diego's men and women realize in general what the city lacks, what it needs, and the opportunity and responsibility of the present generation. They also recognize the peculiar opportunity for joy, for health, for prosperity that life in Southern California, more especially San Diego, offers to all. So let us begin. The debate rules provide for 5-minute opening statements and 2-minute answers, with 1-minute rebuttals if one candidate mentions the other candidate's name or asks that candidate a direct question. We will ask the questions, some submitted by Lambda Alpha members in alternating order, and then we'll end with 3-minute final statements. So welcome, Barbara and Todd. You both want to be mayor of America's 8th largest city and have engaged in some 30 debates so far, 10 times what the presidential candidate signed up for. From what I can tell, you both have been civil, thoughtful, and inspiring in what you see for San Diego's future. So today we're focused on land use and land economics, the prime interests of Lambda Alpha International. Our pre-event coin toss gives first up to Todd in the opening statement and Barbara for the closing. So Todd, you have 5 minutes to lay out your vision for San Diego in the next 4 years. And please address our first question. What is your #1 land use priority during your term as mayor? Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Roger, and thank you, Lambda Alpha, for this opportunity. And for all of you who are tuning in, I think we spend our entire lives on Zoom now. So the fact that you're willing to give an hour of your day to sit here in front of your computers longer, it tells me either you're a glutton for punishment or what I think is probably more truthful, which is that you love this city, you're concerned deeply about its future, and you want to be a part of that future. And I think that's what unites us here this afternoon. To provide some introductory comments, I share with people that I'm running for mayor because as a 3rd-generation San Diegan, I feel as though I know where our city has been. I grew up in Claremont, graduated from Madison High School, attended the University of San Diego. I was the first in my family to go to college. I'm running for mayor because as the son of 2 blue-collar working-class parents, my mom and dad were a hotel maid and a gardener. I understand and know intimately how difficult it is for working-class people to make ends meet in a town as expensive as San Diego. But more importantly, I'm running for mayor because of the vision for where I would like to take our city. And what I would say is that we have many challenges facing our city, and I look forward to answering questions about some of those challenges this afternoon. But broadly speaking, I would say that our biggest challenge as a city is that too often we're a big city that acts like a small town. And what do I mean by that? Well, I'd point out that we spent the better part of the primary election debating scooters and vacation rentals, two issues that most other cities have successfully addressed, and yet continue to bedevil our city when it comes to moving forward. And that time spent on issues like those means that we're not spending time, attention, resources on the issues that are truly impactful in our city. And I think of three examples I'd like to give you. Our homelessness crisis. We are the 8th largest city in the United States, but we have the 5th largest homeless population in the US. We're spending more than we ever have on this particular problem, and yet the problem does not seem to be getting better. It seems to be getting worse. I would argue that's because we're not investing in national best practices. Instead, we're wasting millions of dollars on indoor skydiving facilities that house precisely nobody. When it comes to transportation infrastructure, beyond our potholed streets, clearly we do not have a world-class transportation system, as evidenced by the fact that we have a light rail system and an international airport that are literally next to one another, and yet they don't connect. If we had had this meeting in person, all of us would likely have gotten there by car because we have no other viable and safe options for us to choose from, and that must change if we're going to meet our climate action plan goals, expand our economy, and preserve our quality of life. And lastly, and most importantly, and this answers your question, Roger, is our housing affordability crisis. We are building a significant amount of housing in San Diego. It's not enough to meet our state obligations, but it is more certainly than a lot of other cities. But generally what we're building is luxury housing, housing that is not attainable to working and middle-class San Diegans. And we're building some low-income housing that is important, but it's not enough for that population. But again, it's significantly more than what we're building for working-class San Diegans. So my number one priority as mayor is to expand the number of housing opportunities that are geared toward the working and middle-class people of this city. Folks who earn too much to qualify for housing commission programs, but don't earn enough to live in any of those luxury units that are currently being built. I think this is critical for the ability for businesses to recruit and retain talent in this city. I think it's critical for those of us who grew up in this city, did everything right, got a good education, found a good paying job, but never seemed to be able to get ahead. I think we cannot claim to be a great city if we're just a city for the very wealthy who can afford to live here and the very poor who are trapped here. We must be a city with a vibrant working and middle class. So I believe that if we can embrace the fact that we're the 8th largest city in the United States, the 2nd largest in California, we will finally resolve some of those issues that seem to never get resolved at City Hall, and then take the time and the money and the resources and focus them on solving the major issues facing our city, which again, from where I sit, is our housing affordability crisis, our infrastructure challenges, and our homelessness epidemic. I look forward to discussing more of these issues with you this afternoon.
Thank you, Todd. Barbara, you also have 5 minutes to lay out your vision and name your top land use priority. Go ahead.
Thank you, Roger. So I ran for city council in 2016 after a career in the technology sector because I was frustrated that the street in front of my office was being torn up yet again to have the same work done. I got to City Hall, and quite frankly, what I found is a culture of no accountability and no transparency, a place where major decisions, including land use decisions, are made behind closed doors. And I stood up to this immediately by opposing the Soccer City land grab, a deal that was done behind closed doors and a deal that looked all but inevitable until I stood up and said, Soccer City is not the only option for Mission Valley. I didn't run for public office to serve the status quo. I ran to serve constituents, our neighborhoods, small business owners. And as mayor, it is my vision to grow the economic pie and provide opportunity. This is what I've been doing my whole life. Back in 1986, I joined the newly formed Connect program, which had been established to help start high-tech and biotech companies. At that time, I could have counted the number of life science companies on 2 hands. Today, there are hundreds. And what's very exciting in terms of my economic vision for the city is these good jobs, these high-paying jobs are moving downtown. The revitalization of Horton Plaza, the purchase of the Manchester complex by IQHQ is transformational for our region. And as mayor, I am going to make sure that all San Diegans, particularly those in the southern part of the city who have been excluded from these jobs, will have opportunities in the innovation economy and the good service sector jobs that surround them. Growing up, my role model was my mom, Adelaide Bree. I've always kept her last name in honor of her. She was a single mom. She got divorced from my dad in the 1960s. She went to work full-time at a job where she was paid less than the comparable men. She empowered me to believe I could succeed in the business world, and I graduated from Harvard Business School in 1976 at a time few women were getting an MBA anywhere. Fast forward many years, I was a single mom in 1993. I had 2 daughters, 8 and 11. I was living in a house about to go into foreclosure. I was working at UCSD at the Connect program, but it was clear I needed to forge a new career for myself in order to support my family. And I was on the founding team of a few local successful technology companies. And I view my life as very blessed that I had the opportunities to succeed in this city, and I want to make sure that others do. So in terms of land use, my priority is housing. And how are we going to build housing that working families can afford? I do not support the elimination of single family zoning. I oppose state efforts to take away local control of land use. I believe San Diegans should be in charge of what gets developed in our neighborhoods. And I look at the 3 Roots project in Mira Mesa, which the City Council unanimously approved a few weeks ago after it was unanimously approved by the Mira Mesa Planning Group. It took a few years of negotiation between Mira Mesa residents and the developer to come up with a project that will have 1,800 housing units at all different price points and many more things. It took a few years for the community to get the benefits and that it deserves in exchange for accepting higher density. Here's how I will provide more affordable housing for San Diegans. It starts with Development Services Department. Time is money, and it simply takes too long to get a permit. Second, the pandemic has offered the opportunity to have adaptive reuse of commercial and office buildings, which will not be, we're going to have a lot of vacancies in these buildings as more people continue to work remotely. And we can look at city regulations that will make it easier to do this. Just last week, I met with a property owner that bought an office building in Linda Vista and is turning it into studio apartments for $90,000 a unit, all in land, renovations, building cost, everything. Third, I'm going to bring short-term rentals back to the market. That's 16,000 housing units. That's $1 billion worth of housing that should be available to San Diegans. And I will do this by simply enforcing our existing municipal code, which other cities do. I will continue to support increased density along transit and asking developers. Great, I'm done for now. Thank you all very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Okay, well, the next question to Barbara actually jumps off of what she was talking about a moment ago, and that is this. How would you reform the community planning process, including planning groups, community plan updates, and financial implementation? And in so doing, how would you balance neighborhood and citywide interests? You have,
so thank you, Roger. That does sort of segue into what I was talking about. So since I've been on the council, I have voted to update a number of community plans. Mission Valley, Midway, Old Town, the Marina Boulevard corridor, and what's called the Balboa corridor, which is on the other side of the I-5. And in each case, as I've watched it come to the city council, there has been a lot of community engagement in the process. And there's always some opposition to anything you're going to do, but everyone got a seat at the table. Everybody got to participate in all of these cases, these community plans were updated unanimously. Kearny Mesa is coming next, and I expect that it will add 30 to 35,000 more housing units because this community wants to become the Asian Little Italy. And right now in my council district, the University community plan is being updated. And it's been wonderful to attend the meetings, which are now on Zoom, and to see much more community participation because, you know, many people can't come in person. Well, right now everything is on Zoom, but many people can't come on person. If they're a young family, they may need to get a babysitter. If they're an older person, it may be inconvenient to go out at night. So as the pandemic ends, I think including this Zoom option is very important going forward as we continue to update community plans.
All right, thanks very much, and welcome to your cat.
Oh, yeah, he's very famous.
To Todd, the same question: how would you perform the community planning process? And in doing so, how would you balance the neighborhood and citywide interests? 2 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Roger. And by the way, I love the shirt. I would say that, you know, as someone who's attended community planning group meetings for 20 years now, you know, I feel like I understand and respect and value the participation of our community planning groups. And I'm hopeful, as Councilmember Bree was just sharing, that this new format of virtual meetings can actually enlarge and further democratize these groups. I recognize that if you're the parent of a school-age child, it's extremely difficult to get to a nighttime community planners group meeting. And as a consequence, you know, when you discuss the development of a new park, you probably think of a bathroom a bit differently than those who do have the privilege to be able to participate in a nighttime meeting. And I've seen that play out in my old city council district and recognize the inherent value in being more inclusive and more collaborative. So I hope that this is one way to further democratize and ensure greater levels of participation. This is something that should not go away. At the end of the pandemic, it's something that should be enshrined in the way that we do work, and the planning department can help do that by providing some rules of the road and some guidance. I think that what the next mayor has to do is to continue to invest in community plan updates. When I was on the city council, we updated 3 of the community plans in my city council district. It took 8 years, which was far too long. I believe the process has been sped up and sort of lessons were learned from those experiences. We must continue to do that in order to reset the consensus about what goes where in a community. That sort of regulatory certainty is good for neighborhoods, and it's good for those who want to invest in those neighborhoods. And lastly, I do think it's a responsibility for both the council and the mayor to take a citywide perspective. I think that's particularly true around infrastructure and making sure that the fees that we're charging are able to improve our infrastructure in every community, getting past the notion that we spend all of our lives in one neighborhood and recognizing that we spend our lives in multiple neighborhoods and that we all benefit when the city is able to utilize its resources as flexibly as possible.
All right, thank you, Todd. Next question by Brian Fish jumps off of what some of what both of you said. What is your position regarding Mayor Faulkner's Complete Communities proposal? And if you do not support the current proposal as is, what modifications would you like to see in order to garner your support? So Todd, you have the first answer.
Sure. So I think it's an interesting proposal. I do have some modifications that I think are necessary. I'd point out that I believe the basis of this particular plan is a piece of legislation that I worked with Council President Georgette Gomez to provide, again, some more flexibility to the way cities are able to calculate square footage and floor area ratio, dwelling units per acre. That flexibility will get to what I was saying at the beginning, Roger, which is the provision of more housing that is naturally affordable, particularly to working and middle-class San Diegans. To the extent that there's also a mobility and a parks component to that, I think that is important, because when I hear communities that are sometimes skeptical of new housing development, it's often because they're concerns about infrastructure, or lack thereof, and the concerns around traffic. If I had some criticism, I would say that there is, I think that the unlimited nature of height in some of this proposal can be concerning. My legislation that maybe have inspired this plan was respected existing height limitations, recognizing that that is an issue here in San Diego. A lot of communities are very concerned, and that by addressing that issue, you may undermine support for a proposal that I think its inherent intention around providing more naturally affordable housing, addressing infrastructure, addressing park inequities. Those are all important things. It doesn't appear as though this mayor is going to be able to have the council consider this before his time is up. My commitment is to make sure that we have a fully involved community process to make sure that we get this right, because I recognize that this could be a critical component for me achieving, again, what I understood was what I shared with you as my #1 priority, which is increasing the housing that is available to working and middle-class San Diegans.
All right, thank you. And Barbara, again, the question is, what is your position on the Complete Communities proposal, and what modifications, if any, would you like to see in order to garner your support?
So I have called this proposal the Incomplete Communities Plan or the Completely Ignored Communities Plan. And I think what's most distressing to me is that the mayor is rushing this through during a pandemic and without enough community input. So I would like to start from scratch by working with our community planning groups to come up with a better solution going forward. I still think the major way we're going to be able to provide more housing at reasonable prices is by doing the community plan updates, giving everyone certainty about what's going to get built where. Then developers can build by right, and we can do master EIRs when we do the community plan updates to create a lot more certainty in the development process. And we can, one of the things I want to focus on is revamping development services, which is moving forward. I'm very pleased to see you can now submit everything online. You can sign up ahead of time for an appointment that you can do on Microsoft Teams or Zoom. You don't have to go down to City Hall and wait in person, which you can't do now during the pandemic anyway, but that DSD is easing into the 21st century. So I want a process that respects the character of our neighborhoods. I want a process that doesn't eliminate single family zoning. And I want a process that acknowledges that when communities accept increased density, we make sure they get the infrastructure and the public benefits that go along with it.
All right, and Barbara, this is a takeoff on that same issue in a way from Jeff Graham. He asked, it can be argued that NIMBYism in San Diego has contributed to the city's housing crisis and rapid increase in rents and prices. You both have differing views on what is appropriate with regard to increases in building heights and greater residential density along commercial corridors and near public transit. What policies or strategies will you propose to meet demand and make housing more affordable? So you have 2 minutes, Barbara.
Yeah, so I touched on some of this in an earlier question, revamp DSD, make it more customer friendly, adaptive reuse of commercial and office into housing, which can be both for sale housing and rental housing, enforcing our existing law against short-term rentals in our neighborhoods, continuing to update community plans along transit with appropriate density, and asking developers for something back when we're giving them increased land values because of allowing increased density. This is what we did in Morena Boulevard, where 15% of the housing must be affordable to families earning up to 100% of median. And these are the police officers, firefighters, librarians, school teachers, nurses who earn too much for subsidized housing, but find it challenging to work in San Diego. Also, I'm planning to develop a first-time down payment assistance plan for first-time home buyers, building on what the city has started to do that I worked on with another council member for police officers who live in the city. And also, I'm now looking at modular housing, and I've met with someone who's building a modular housing factory in Tijuana and believes they can deliver units at 100 to 140,000 a unit, all in, including land cost. This is extraordinary, and in the right locations will be a great way of providing housing that working families can afford.
Thank you. To remind you, Todd, the question has to do with NIMBYism, housing crisis, the increased rents and prices. And you both have some different views on building heights and density. So what policies or strategies will you propose to meet demand and make housing more affordable?
Yeah. Well, it's simple economics that when you restrict supply, it necessarily increases cost. And so let me tell you what I won't do. I won't engage in the kind of divisive rhetoric that President Trump uses to necessarily scare communities about housing in their neighborhoods. I do not believe that new housing is necessarily bad for a community. In fact, I've witnessed it in my own city council district, lift up and turn neighborhoods around and make them better places, make them more enjoyable places that the residents have a better quality of life. So I think a lot of it comes from what kind of tone you choose to set. And you can see that I'm very clearly understanding of the fact that housing is a major problem in this city, and that you need a mayor that's going to lead with the right kind of rhetoric that unifies people rather than divides them on this important issue. Roger, in terms of strategies, well, you can look at my time on the city council, whether it was updating the Uptown, Golden Hill, and North Park community plans, to doing things like our affordable housing density bonus ordinance, to my time in the legislature, whether it's passing the CASA Act or the Missing Middle Income Act, allowing the San Diego Housing Commission to be able to build housing that is not just for low and very low income San Diegans, but creating mixed projects that could be inclusive of folks that have 100 or 120% area median income. These are all strategies that we know work. The willingness to engage and not scrap a proposal that just because the current mayor has suggested it, but instead rather refine it, recognizing that years and probably a significant amount of public money has been spent, I think is critical. And my hope is to be able to make sure that every community is doing that, because Roger, I don't personally believe that San Diego is responsible for solving the entirety of the state of California's housing crisis. And because while San Diego is making efforts, even if they're falling short, we at least are making efforts. What we know, Roger, and I know you because you've reported on this for years, is that a lot of cities are shirking their responsibilities around housing production. And I think it will go a long way to make sure that those communities who are concerned or resistant to new housing see that every community is doing their fair share.
All right, thank you, Todd. Now, homelessness. Question from Tony Pauker. This is for Todd. San Diego's homelessness remains a significant issue. It typically gets included in the affordable housing discussion. However, for many, the real issue is mental health or substance abuse. Given the county is primarily responsible for mental health, what city actions will you propose to deal with this mental health crisis that's at the root of so much of homelessness? 2 minutes.
Well, Tony, thank you for mentioning mental illness. I recognize our society has a stigma against discussing this, and it is an important equation, part of the homelessness equation. Yes, a good chunk of our homeless are economically displaced, and that's why having a mayor who will talk about housing in inclusive terms rather than divisive terms is important. But to address your point about mental health, and I would include behavioral health and substance abuse, you're right. That is the jurisdiction of the county of San Diego, and I think it's important for the city and the county to set aside its past poor relationship and reset this relationship to be able to find progress on this issue. I've seen taking our housing commission and the housing that we have, marrying it with the county's Health and Human Services Agency and its services. Housing plus services is how you end homelessness. In this election, I have the endorsement of County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher because he believes that I'm the candidate that he can work with to reset that relationship between the city and the county, make it more functional, and as a consequence, move more folks off the streets. I think beyond that, I want to draw upon my experiences in the state legislature and the relationships I've built with folks like our governor and my colleagues in the Assembly and in the Senate to do things like making sure that counties that have Mental Health Services Act dollars that they've been hoarding for years actually spend those dollars. Again, helping to facilitate that partnership at the local level that I just talked about. Also making sure that we're addressing state conservatorship laws, understanding that some of the folks who are out on the street are not capable of taking care of themselves, but the bar for conservatorship is so high that there's no way to logically move them off the streets other than to move them into incarceration, which is more expensive than housing them suitably. I believe that we can be leaders in this regard for getting reforms at the state level, and I believe my unique experiences make me capable of making sure that San Diego's at the table and getting the results that people like Tony and others are demanding.
Thank you, Todd. And Barbara, again, has to do with homelessness and mental health. Given the county is primarily responsible for mental health, what city actions will you propose to deal with this mental health crisis that's at the root of so much of homelessness? 2 minutes.
Yeah, so Todd is right. Historically, the city and the county have not worked together collaboratively. The convention center is a really good example of how that dynamic is changing. So during the pandemic, I think most of you know that the city and the county have been working together to house homeless individuals at the convention center. Currently, about 1,000 people are there right now. And it really has been great coordination in addressing each person's unique needs and getting them the help that they need. And the navigation center, which I've heard my opponent attack, has actually been a very important piece of this. That building was bought to be a navigation center, not to be housing, to provide a place for social workers to use as a base, to go out into the community and talk to homeless individuals. And that has been a key reason why the convention center has been so successful. And as mayor, I will build on this, and I'm very happy that the council has approved keeping the convention center open until at least the end of the year and perhaps longer. And we've also approved accepting state money. Thank you, Todd, for helping to get that state money to buy 400 hotel rooms, which can house about 500 homeless individuals. So I have a multifaceted approach, and we'll just end by sharing my personal story of meeting a homeless gentleman on the street. He shared with me he lost his job, his wife had left him, he was drinking too much, he'd been living with his sister, she had dropped him off a mile away. I called 211 San Diego, hoping to find a shelter bed for him, and was passed around from person to person. Finally, on my own, I called the Alpha Project to get this gentleman the help that he wanted. What is clear is, in this day and age, how can there not be a phone number that is answered 24 hours a day by a human being when someone wants help, when a business owner sees a homeless individual outside who desperately needs help, and I'm going to fix that as mayor.
Maybe Todd, do you want to rebut what Barbara had something to say on the navigation center, where that ride was going to happen and the city bought it for that purpose in homelessness?
I would be delighted to, Roger. Listen, the navigation center is an abject failure. It was purchased without an appraisal from a politically connected donor of both my opponent and our current mayor. It does not house anybody. It's a 27,000 square foot, 3-story building that houses no one. And with respect, a phone number is not a bed. A phone number is not a housing unit. And so we can create a hotline for folks to call, and I would acknowledge that 211 already exists. The problem, Roger, is that we don't have the mental health beds to put folks in, the shelter beds to move folks into, the permanent supportive housing units to move folks into. And without that inventory, Roger, we're going to continue to spin our wheels. As I already mentioned, we are spending more than we ever have as a city on this problem. And yet, despite the rhetoric coming from City Hall, I can't find a lot of average San Diegans that think this problem is getting better. They think it's getting worse. It is time to put a homeless advocate in the mayor's office. I have spent my career working on this issue. It is time to change this around. It is time for us to join cities that have ended chronic homelessness.
Thank you. Roger, I'd just like to add something. The navigation center is being used for its intended use. The appraisal is the city bought the building for $200,000 less than the appraisal. And as I said, it's being used for its intended use, unlike 101 Ash Street.
Well, let me stop you there, because the next question is right on that point, and I thought we'll move to that. We may have a couple of rebuttals when you hear the question. So this is Barbara, you go first. What is your opinion of the city's real estate assets department, and what changes would you make to it, if any? Here's where you can weigh in on SDSU, 101 S Street, or any other recent city development issues. So Barbara, take it away.
Well, clearly the real estate assets department is a mess, and the mayor runs he or she runs the bureaucracy. And back in 2016, before I joined the council, the city council voted to buy 101 Ash Street, which Mr. Gloria Todd, enthusiastically supported. You can just go back and watch the public testimony. He was told in public testimony that the city was paying above the appraisal. It was a complicated lease purchase. The city could not refinance for a long time, and if it did, there were like a lot of penalties. And the indemnity language, this is page 1 of the agreement, is extraordinary. You would never allow any of your clients or business partners to sign a deal like this. But there were special interests pushing the purchase of this building by the city, and so it went through. And it is the worst land deal in city history, according to some media outlets. And I do understand basic real estate. I've been involved in a lot of complicated real estate transactions in my life, and our real estate assets department needs to be completely revamped.
Okay, again, Todd, what's your opinion of the real estate assets department? You can bring in other departments if you want. And what changes would you make to it, if any? And here you can weigh in on SDSU, Ash Street, or whatever other development makes your point. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's always important to know where we're trying to go, which is that we need to reform that department. We need it to be better when it comes to executing deals and managing city assets. We need to avoid some of the recent land deals that the city has taken, and that means new leadership for that department That means new expectations, performance management, consulting. We have utilized consultants who obviously have not served our interests well. And so there's a number of changes that are obvious. And the reason why it's obvious, Roger, is that you have 101 Ash Street, that when I was on the city council, we were told that this particular building was in good condition, that we could move in immediately, so much so that we bought all the furniture in the building. That's how quickly we intended to occupy that building, and that it would save us $40 million. Now, here we are 4 years later, none of those things are true. And interestingly, the city council, 2 years after acquiring the building, decided to embark upon a $30 million remodel of that building, giving up 75% of the projected savings, which is what disturbed asbestos and has made the building uninhabitable. Now, I would point out, we've already discussed the indoor skydiving facility that was the subject of a federal investigation that doesn't house any homeless people. And I'll also throw into the mix the Othello Avenue property up in Kearny Mesa, which was purchased as a city maintenance yard, but actually 2 years after its purchase is not being used for that purpose. They can't use it because the buildings that were acquired don't fit city vehicles. Roger, I voted for one of those projects I just mentioned. My opponent voted for all 3 of those projects. So it really shows a systemic problem at City Hall with regard to the real estate transactions it tends to participate in, the processes followed to make those transactions real, and the intended impacts or the lack of considered impacts of those particular procurements. I believe that there's nowhere to go but up where this is concerned. The question is, are you going to have strong enough leadership that's going to go in there and find new leadership, find new supports, and make sure that the projects that we put before the city council are good projects for taxpayers? I believe I can do that.
Barbara, you probably want to rebut, but I wanted you to address one related question to this, which seems to come up from both of your points of view, which is the city council does not seem to have the information you need or able to comprehend what you get from the mayor's office. So rebut would, if you like, but also maybe you can address that element as well.
Well, first of all, you need to get good advice, and that's a whole separate issue. But if the original lease purchase had not indemnified the seller to the extent that it did, the city would not be in the situation that it is today. But clearly, and I've been advocating for almost a year that the city take steps to extricate itself from the lease. At an August council meeting, I said it's time to put the rent payments into escrow to bring everybody to the table, all the interested parties, on how to resolve this issue. At that point, the city attorney and other legal experts did not take me seriously, but a few weeks later, the mayor apparently took my advice and suspended rent payments. I believe there is a path out of this. There are a lot of interested parties. There's Sistera, there's Manchester, there's Shapery, there's Jason Hughes, there's bond brokers, there's bond holders. There are a lot of entities that would like to get in. I believe we'll get into a room and we can arrive at a resolution. I'm always frustrated when lawsuits get filed too quickly, and I did vote against filing the lawsuit against Sistera. We can always file a lawsuit. Lawyers like to file lawsuits, and I think the city attorney doesn't want us to get to the bottom of what really happened in this transaction, which involves my opponent. And, I think it is important we get to the bottom, that all the documents be disclosed. I've never seen the closing statement for this. And apparently, according to a Voice of San Diego story, there's $14 million missing, $14 million extra that the city paid. I'd certainly like to see those documents.
Hey, Barbara, let's stop there if you don't mind. And I imagine Todd might have some points to add, but I also want Todd to bring up how things were handled at San Diego State West, or the sports arena development, or even the Balboa Park, San Diego High School. All these things are up in the air. What do you make of what she said, plus changing things?
Yeah, well, Roger, I think you were on the right track when you were talking a moment ago about the fact that the information that council members like myself and my opponent have are only as good as what's provided by the mayor's office. And we have to demand more transparency to the extent that it's kind of obvious how the skydiving facility got purchased and who was helped out there. We understand maybe some of the motivations behind this. I'm grateful that our city attorney did the due diligence on SDSU West. If left to their own devices, my opponent and some of her supporters would have had the city be on the hook for numerous obligations and responsibilities. And that timing, that extra time, I think, will be able to save the city a lot of money in the long haul. With regard to the allegations of misconduct, Roger, you have seen that kind of conspiracy theory online. It has been debunked. NBC News, who reported that, actually had to retract the story The reporters that shared that kind of stories are now on a leave of absence because they can't work on City Hall issues any longer. I'm disappointed that my opponent will continue to spread that misinformation that has been
I'm
proven.
not talking about NBC. I'm talking about Voice of San Diego telling us there's $14 million missing.
Well,
And I would like to comment about SDSU West. What frustrated me during the SDSU West negotiations was that the council and the public were excluded. As the city attorney had issues with what SDSU West was doing, what she felt needed to be included in the final purchase and sale agreement, she should have been bringing those issues to the council in public on a more regular basis. And that is what upset me about the process, is that the public was not included, and it probably could have been resolved much more quickly if the public had been involved and all the issues had been aired in public.
okay, one final thought from Todd, then move on to the next question. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm good, Roger.
Oh, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's move on to something less controversial, perhaps, parks. This is to Todd to begin with. And this is from Scott Sandell. As done in Denver and other large cities, would you propose a parks bond measure or tax measure for greater operations, maintenance, and capital expenditures?
Not necessarily. So Roger, we have an infrastructure deficit in this city that is substantial. And that's across all of our asset classes, our roads, our sidewalks, our parks, our public facilities, our rec centers, our libraries. And I'm an advocate of an approach that is similar to what they've done in Phoenix and other cities, where you have a multi-year master plan for a bond program that encompasses, most of the assets that we have in a strategic plan. I don't think that the city has ever sat down to kind of figure out what properties are in the most disrepair, which are the ones that need the most attention. And I think importantly, we haven't done what we need to in terms of making sure that our existing revenues are being spent appropriately. Let me give you a couple examples. We have large unencumbered balances in our CIPs and FBA funds that could be put to use for some of these projects. And I think we owe it to taxpayers to make sure that we're making the use of all of those dollars before asking for more. When I noticed the fact that the state of California has doubled the amount of money the city is receiving for road repair, and yet a recent KPBS iNewsSource story says the city's not capable of spending that money, I think you have to be able to say specifically that we are spending the money that we got before asking for more. But that said, knowing that the size of our infrastructure deficit is measured in the billions, and clearly we don't have billions sitting around, at some point we're going to have to put together a comprehensive plan that the citizens could consider and potentially support. That's going to take some time. And my hope is to be able to run an efficient organization that makes the best use of existing dollars and has a full and understanding of our existing deficit, and then ask the voters to work on this in a systematic way, the way other big cities do. Again, that's the whole idea. The way we have approached this has been a very small town mentality that has left us with crumbling streets and sidewalks and inadequate public facilities. San Diegans deserve better. I believe we can do better, and it starts by electing a better mayor.
Okay, repeat from Scott Sandell. Barbara, as done in Denver and other large cities, would you propose a parks bond measure or tax measure for greater operations, maintenance, and capital expenditures?
So first of all, I think this is an issue Todd and I agree on. I'm not going to repeat everything he said. He made a lot of really good points. I think the key is, who do you trust as mayor to lead this kind of process, to be willing to stand up to special interests, to get something like this done. And I have a track record of standing up to special interests, which are spending over $1 million trying to beat me. And I want to put our neighborhoods first, whether it's parks, streets, sidewalks, libraries. I understand that what is core to what makes San Diego so special is our neighborhoods. And on top of that, using my private sector experience to create 2 new employment centers, one downtown and one in Otay Mesa, focused on tech, biotech, and pharmaceutical manufacturing, putting good jobs closer to where people live.
All right, thank you. Next topic has to do with transit. Barbara, you'll be the first one here. Question is, transit-oriented development is a favorite planning tool, but some might argue that many residents don't actually use the transit at their doorstep. What are some of other approaches you would champion to get people to use their cars less and transit more as a way to achieve our climate action plan goals?
Well, the way we meet our climate action plan goals, we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and there's many ways to do that. One is to have jobs closer to where people live, where we already have fairly good transit coming in. So that's why downtown and Otay Mesa are so important, particularly with the expected completion of the Blue Line from downtown to the UTC area by the end of 2021. So that's one piece. And making transit more friendly by perhaps putting Wi-Fi on transit. How novel is that? And second, I would say, doing more with establishing a remote workforce on a permanent basis with the city as a leader. Right now, many city employees are working remotely. DSD is working remotely. It's been very effective. Many people would like to continue doing this at least a few days a week. I think the city should be a model for employers all over the region on how to have an effective remote workforce.
All right, Todd, same question. What are some other approaches you would champion to get people to use their cars less and transit more as a way to achieve our climate action plan goals?
Yeah. Well, Roger, it goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. If you build a transportation system with a light rail line next to an airport, but you don't actually make them connect, it's understandable why San Diegans may not embrace it the way that we hope and would like them to. And so what we're going to have is a mayor that is willing to champion public transit and a multimodal future. And that is, I think, a distinction in this race. We have to embrace a multimodal future and building a world-class transportation system. I will use the authorities under Assembly Bill 805 to have a leadership role at SANDAG to make sure that our next regional transportation plan is a much more inclusive vision that is focused on the 21st century, not the 1980s, which is the current sort of status quo approach that too many at SANDAG and in this race support. Additionally, it doesn't cost a lot to make this kind of transition, Roger. Just look at El Cajon Boulevard through Mid-City. Under the leadership of Chris Ward and Georgette Gomez, we've been able to, with a can of paint, create a bus-only lane on that major thoroughfare, reducing wait times and increasing the speed of the buses, which therefore is increasing the ridership. It doesn't require massive expenditures of dollars. It's just about making transit work better. And so whether it's embracing a big vision and pushing for that vision on a regional level, working in Sacramento and Washington, D.C., as I did when I was the chair of the Transportation Committee at SANDAG to get the federal full funding agreement to build the Blue Line to UCSD, or if it's working with City Streets Division to do things like having dedicated transit lanes, improving the experience, and making sure that people want to ride transit, we would go a long way to making that transition and meeting our climate action plan goals. I'm actually very optimistic that this is possible. I'm hopeful this will occur. I'm not one of those people that says that transit can't work in Southern California. We simply have chosen not to let it work in Southern California. And I'm hoping to be a leader that allows us to choose a different path, a path that says that you should be able to walk, bike, take transit, or drive your car if that's your choice, because we should have choices in our daily commutes. We don't currently have choices.
All right, thank you. Before we go to your concluding statements, I wanted to run a little lightning round. I want you to say yes, no, or maybe. So we'll talk, Todd first. Do you support paid parking at the city's beaches and parks?
Not in every instance, no.
Barbara?
No.
Barbara, do you support the convention center expansion?
Yes.
Todd?
Yeah, wholeheartedly.
Todd, should the city bring back a city architect position?
Yes, we should.
Barbara?
Yes, when we have funding.
Okay, Barbara, should the city insist on a sizable annual lease payment of, say, $1 million a year in exchange for a new San Diego high school lease for its 34 acres in Balboa Park?
No.
Todd?
No.
Finally, Todd, do you back San Diego's five big moves transportation plan?
In concept, yes.
Barbara?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. So you both have 3 minutes, final statements. Barbara, you go first.
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me today. I'd like to refer you all to my website where you can read my roadmap to recovery, which outlines my plans for reinventing our city by implementing specific solutions to challenges we face in job creation, homelessness, transit, and the environment. But I think the biggest challenge the next mayor faces is to change the city hall culture of no transparency, no accountability, and no fiscal responsibility. My life has been about coming up with solutions and delivering results. I've had a diverse career. I've been a journalist and a small business owner. I was a leader at Connect in the early days, the organization that helped grow San Diego's innovation economy. I've started 2 organizations that empower women, Athena San Diego and Run Women Run. I believe the diversity of my life experiences has prepared me to lead our city at this moment in time. I began today by talking about the woman who was my role model, my mother, Adelaide Bree. I'll close by talking about the people who are my inspiration, my children and my grandchildren. I'm married to my second and last husband, Neil Centuria. We each brought 2 children to our marriage. They all married people we adore. Right now, we have 3 grandchildren with 4 more coming between Election Day and March. The last 2, my daughter Rachel and her husband Daniel, are having identical twin boys. And every day that I'm mayor, I will be thinking about our children and our grandchildren and how we can make this a better city for them. How do we give them good paying jobs, affordable housing, and livable neighborhoods, and streets that are safe and clean? We have so many opportunities to make this city work for all of us. With the right mayor, someone who knows how to get things done, we can capitalize on these opportunities. It's clear we have to think differently and act differently if we're going to move our city forward. What's worked in the past isn't going to work in the future. I believe that's why my entrepreneurial experience is so important. I've had to reinvent myself and companies and organizations I've been involved with over and over again. And that's what our city needs to do today and tomorrow. I've demonstrated that I have the independence and courage to confront the status quo at City Hall. Please join me. I would be honored to have your vote. Together, we can fix this.
Thank you, Barbara. And Todd, final thoughts, 3 minutes, please.
Sure thing. And thank you, Roger, for moderating. It's always a thankless task. You did a great job. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and giving us an opportunity to share our respective visions for our city. I believe that it is time for our city to start embracing the fact that we're the 8th largest in the country, the 2nd largest in California. And I shared with you all at the beginning that I'm the son of a hotel maid and a gardener, 2 people who worked extremely hard and were able to buy a home in San Diego and put their 2 kids through college, the first in our family to attend. I know that that story was possible 30 years ago. I think we all doubt whether or not that's possible today in San Diego. And I think the mayor should arrive at City Hall every day, working hard to actually create and maintain those pathways of opportunities. The opportunity that this city has given me to go beyond what my parents had accomplished and to be in a position to potentially be the next mayor of San Diego. I'm not content with that, having lived that experience. I want to make sure other people can live that experience. And that requires us to build more housing that's affordable to working and middle-class San Diegans. And the question before earlier about NIMBYism, I recognize that every time we say no, that is excluding people from the San Diego story, from this opportunity to enjoy all that our community has. And I recognize that often these conversations are difficult, but time and again, when I was on the city council, what did I do? I rolled up my sleeves, I brought people together, and we got big things done, like the Uptown, North Park, and Golden Hill community plan updates, like the establishment of 2 homeless shelters, one in downtown San Diego at 6th and A, another just a couple blocks from my home here in Mission Hills. It is proof that these things can be done. And importantly, in both of those cases, after they've been accomplished, the community understands that they are improving the neighborhoods, not harming them. And you need a mayor that is capable of having that optimism, that can-do attitude, that willingness to unite people, and that willingness to move forward, recognizing that progress is what we need in the city. You have seen me lead as a city council member, as the city's council president, as the city's interim mayor, and in the state legislature, where I've gotten big things done, like the recent signing of my legislation to make sure that the Naval Warfare Systems Command stays in San Diego and that the thousands of good paying jobs on that location will be here for generations to come, and build the world-class transportation hub that will be a part of our transportation system in the future, thereby further securing our economic and ecological future. You have seen me accomplish important things. I'm asking you for the opportunity to continue to serve my hometown, I love this city. I've spent every day of my professional career working to make it better. And with your vote, I can do that again. I did the job for mayor for 8 months. I know that I can do it for the next 8 years. I ask you to join the Democratic Party, our Chamber of Commerce, our Labor Council, our firefighters, our police officers, our lifeguards, our teachers and our nurses, this coalition that is big and broad, not just in support of my campaign, but in support of advancing this vision of a city that works for all of us. Thank you guys so much for your time this afternoon.
Well, thank you so much for both of you for joining us today, and to all participants watching from wherever you are in Zoom land. Here's a reminder to vote and vote early. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Roger.
Thank you.